Alright guys, so today I'll show you how to maximize Ragnar or Regnaw, okay, here in Anime Vanguards, and he's a very powerful unit, but you're gonna need to know how to use him, okay? Alright, so essentially, okay, I'm gonna show you guys how to do this because it is quite complicated. Right now, I have my Regnaw right here, and essentially how it's gonna work is, in order to maximize its full potential, you're gonna need something called buff stacking, right? And how it works is you're gonna need to have basically all the buffs in the game that currently exists right now. So this is going to include Harukarin's buffs, and after Harukarin's buffs, it's also going to include the buffs of Fubuki and the buff of the new unit Subaru. It's gonna include all these buffs in the game. So I think right around wave 6 is when all of it is gonna be activated. And also you're gonna need the passive of Ragnar. He does have a passive that allows him to get up to 40%. So you're gonna need to activate that, and Harukarin's passives, and every passive that every buff and passive that's available to you, you're gonna need that in order to buff stack, which is essentially the method that we're talking about right here. Okay, so I think I still got an additional 3 damage. Okay, I think this one right here is the last one. I believe 6k is the last one. So this is 6k on placement, right? So already, he's immediately like very good already. Like 6k on placement is actually diabolical, bro. 6k on placement. Okay, so now we're not getting anything from Harukarin, so I think I've maximized the Harukarin. So now we're moving on to the Regnaw. We're moving on to the second placement, because if you place him once, you're going to delete the other placed Ragnar. So you can only have one Ragnar in the map. But if you use his passive correctly, he can do so much damage. So as you guys can see right here, I should be getting some extra damage from here. Okay, if I see a 0 pop up right here, that means he's activated his passive completely. Okay, so 0, that means he's activated his passive completely. I'm gonna place him, let me just see that, okay. I'm gonna place him right there again. So now at upgrade 0, he is doing 23,000 damage on the third placement. So this is very good. We're on track so far. Okay, he should have around like 48,000 damage on placement at the 4th placement or the last placement. So once I see the 0 pop up, that means his passive is working as intended, and now I can place his last copy. So if I mess something up here, then the damage will be less. But if I did everything correctly, his damage should be diabolically high, okay? His damage should be insanely high. Check Regnaw, okay? So as you guys can see right here, 48,000. Okay, so that means he's getting 0. So that means his passive is completely maxed out. Let me just upgrade him to max right here, and we are going to see 387,000 damage on Regnaw with 4.6 SPA, guys. 447,000 with 4.6 SPA. The goats of goats, bro. This is an insanely passive. This is an insanely powerful passive. And he only has the fist one. I think Vigor is what it's called. So 447,000. So again, this does apply every single passive that exists. So you have Harukarin's passive, Padora's gift, you have Subaru, you have Fubuki, and you have his own passive. And that's how he's doing this much damage. Alright, so just to summarize basically everything that I said, how it works is you're gonna need to stack Ragnar's passive and also the buffs of the buff units in the game that are currently available. Those buff units being Subaru, Fubuki, Harukarin, and also Paduru or Padaru as a familiar can sometimes decrease the SPA, I believe. Although sometimes I forget to use it. But yeah, again, the important one is Harukarin, Fubuki, and Subaru, and Ragnar's passive. The first thing that you really need to understand is Ragnar's passive, each hit will increase his damage by 10% up to 40%. Which means that if he hits 4 times, it will go up to 40%. Now, this 40% number is not consistent because his passive will stack per placement. So I believe at the 4th placement, his passive will start doing 90% increase per attack that he does. So all you have to remember here is that each attack will trigger an increase in his damage. And how you tell that it's maxed out, which you need to max it out before moving on to the next placement, is when that 0% pops up, right? That's how you're going to be able to tell that Regnaw is now maxed out his passive. Now, assuming you just started the wave, the first unit that you should put down is Regnaw, because the earlier you put him down alongside Harukarin and the buffs, you are going to be able to set him up much faster. Okay, the later you place him down, the later his buffs will get set up. So usually I place Regnaw down first, then I place 2 Harukarins right beside him to make sure that both of the Harukarins can buff him, because you do need to wait for the 18% cap of Harukarin on him before placing his next placement, because that will again carry on to his next placement, which is actually a massive increase. 18% is a very massive increase in damage. So during the first placement, you also have to take notice of whether or not Harukarin's buff on him has reached its cap of 18% or not. And you will be able to see this when after one wave, you can see a 0% pop up on his head. That signifies that Harukarin's buff on him has now reached its cap and can no longer buff him any further. Now, I know it can be quite complicated, but if you follow these steps that I just showed you in today's video, and again, just watch the video again if you don't understand it. I tried to explain it as best as I could. However, this is a pretty complex unit, but again, if you manage to get him right, you can get basically a free Monarch unit, because his passives is very unique in a sense that it basically allows you to stack the buffs, which will reduce his SPA, increase his range, increase his damage, basically giving him a ton of buffs and a ton of damage, which allows him to basically out SPA or out DPS most Monarch units in the game. It's actually crazy how good Regnaw is. The only problem with Regnaw actually is how he does need a lot of preparation. I mentioned that you're gonna need like 4 buffs, so that means you're gonna need to have a Saburo, a Fubuki, and a Harukarin alongside a Padaru and his own passives. So that is actually quite a lot of preparation for him to even really be at his full potential. However, I would much rather be required to bring these units than be required to get a Monarch to get this unit's full potential. But if you do not, like for example, if you do not want to get him to, you do not want to get the entire buffs on him, sorry if I'm having a hard time speaking here, but if you do not manage to get the full buff on him, he still can do a ton of damage. On my testing, when I messed up the buff, I believe he was still able to do somewhere around 25,000 DPS. If you do not apply any buffs to him, I believe he can still go somewhere around 20k, 19k DPS maybe, which means he's still a very good unit. And I'm talking about just his passive alone here. So if you just consider the fact that even without any buffs, he can still be a very good damage unit, then he's pretty insane. And also, I only have Vigor on him, and he's very, very good. He out damages or out DPSs most of my units. But again, if you really want to bring out the most in him, then gets him with a full buff. And that way, he's going to become very insane.